In the twilight between heaven and earth, where the veil of time grows thin and eternity breathes through the cracks of reality, there walked a man, chosen not by kings, nor by scholars, but by the voice that shaped the stars. His name was Ezekiel, son of Buzi, priest of the exile, prophet of the impossible. It was in the land of captivity, by the rivers of Babylon, that the heavens tore open like scrolls of fire. Winds of the eternal roared through the skies, and the eyes of 1,000 wheels turned toward him. Beasts with faces of lion, ox, eagle, and man soared within spinning spheres of light. Above them, a throne of sapphire glowed, and upon it sat one who commands galaxies with a whisper. These were not mere dreams. They were visions etched into the machinery of time, whispers from the realm where days are not counted and clocks do not tick. Through Ezekiel, the Lord unveiled the celestial clock, a divine mechanism beyond space and age, marking the rise and fall of kingdoms, the secrets of redemption, and the march toward the end of days. In this sacred journey, we will follow the footsteps of the prophet as he is lifted by the Spirit, sees the bones of nations reassemble, and watches the temple descend from the heavens like a bride adorned in fire. What Ezekiel saw was not for his time alone, but for all who dare to peer beyond the veil. Come now, traveler of faith and wonder, and behold the ticking of heaven's timepiece. The clock is turning. The visions await. Chapter 1. The Winds of the Exile. The sky above the Chebar River burned with an eerie stillness, as if heaven itself had paused to breathe. Dust danced in the twilight, caught between the laughter of Babylonian soldiers and the weeping of Israelite exiles. Among them stood a man, not old, but warmed by silence, Ezekiel, son of Buzi, priest by blood, stranger by fate. He watched the waters flow eastward, his thoughts drifting with the current. The scrolls of his fathers weighed heavily in his memory, but their words seemed distant now, fragments of a vanished world. His people had lost the temple, the ark, and the voice of the Almighty. What remained was captivity, silence, longing. Then it came. The ground trembled, subtle at first, like a pulse from the deep. The air grew thick, electric. Above him, the clouds unraveled. A windstorm surged from the north, black and roaring, enfolding fire and lightning like the breath of an unseen beast. Thunder cracked like a gate unhinged, and Ezekiel fell to his knees. Out of the heart of the storm came a vision no mortal had ever seen. 4 living beings emerged from the fire, radiant and terrible. Each had 4 faces, of man, lion, ox, and eagle, and 4 wings stretched from their bodies like banners of flame. Their legs were straight, feet like bronze hooves. Under their wings were human hands, dozens of them, moving without sound or hesitation. They glided, not turning, for wherever the Spirit willed, they went. Beside each creature spun a wheel, vast and glimmering with eyes. Within the wheels were other wheels, interlocked and alive. Their rims shone like topaz, and they moved as if guided by some invisible rhythm. They did not turn as they moved. They hovered, burning with purpose. Ezekiel tried to speak, but his tongue clung to the roof of his mouth. In the heart of the vision, above the living creatures, was a platform of crystalline expanse, clear as ice, vast as the sky. And above that platform, a throne of sapphire. Upon the throne sat a figure like a man, yet not man. Fire surrounded him from waist up and waist down, and a rainbow encircled him like a halo. It was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Then Ezekiel fell face down, trembling, undone. For he had seen what no eye had seen, had stood at the gate where time surrenders to eternity. The voice came, not thunder, not wind, but a whisper that shattered stone. Son of man, stand to your feet. I will speak to you. And the Spirit entered him, not like breath, but like a flame that knew his name. He rose, no longer of the earth, no longer bound by exile or flesh. For he had been chosen, not to comfort kings or warn cities, but to see the workings of the celestial clock. The gears of eternity had begun to turn, and Ezekiel would walk where no man had walked before. Chapter 2. The Scroll of Fire. Ezekiel stood suspended between realms, neither fully of earth, nor yet of heaven. The roar of the storm had quieted, but the fire still danced within his soul. All around him, the world had faded. No river, no captors, no sky, only the realm of the vision, the place where the divine meets the mortal like lightning meets the mountain. Above him, the throne remained, a sapphire blaze encircled by a bow of light. The one who sat upon it did not move, and yet his presence rippled through the cosmos like waves upon a vast sea. Every beat of Ezekiel's heart echoed with awe, with dread, with a kind of sacred clarity that seared through the fog of time. Then, from beneath the throne, a figure approached, robed in flame, faceless yet not unknown. In its hands was a scroll, not ink upon parchment, but fire etched upon fire, a living script that whispered as it curled in the celestial wind. Son of man, the voice rang again, deeper than thunder, yet nearer than breath. Take and eat. Ezekiel reached forward. The scroll pulsed with heat and hunger. As it touched his lips, it melted into sweetness, like honey upon the tongue, then turned bitter as embers in the gut. The words consumed him, folding into his bones and blood, igniting visions that unfolded like stars across the sky. He saw Jerusalem still standing proud and blind. Within its walls, priests offered incense to idols. In secret chambers, elders wept before creeping things carved in stone. In the shadows of the temple, darkness coiled like a serpent beneath golden altars. But beyond the corruption, Ezekiel saw something stranger still, an opening, a rift in the heavens, where the machinery of the universe spun like a great clockwork of divine precision. Wheels upon wheels, wings upon winds, voices upon winds, and all of it centered not on power, but on purpose. The celestial clock, its cogs were the nations, its pendulum, the rise and fall of kings, its chime, the voice of prophets crying out across centuries. And at the heart of it, Yahweh, not bound by time, but orchestrating it, shaping destiny like a potter shapes clay. Then the vision shifted. Ezekiel found himself within a great valley, its floor covered in bones, white dry, countless. A wind stirred, carrying the silence of ancient death. And then a voice asked him, Son of man, can these bones live? He opened his mouth, but only one answer formed. Sovereign Lord, only you know. Prophesy to the bones, came the command. And as Ezekiel spoke, a tremor passed through the valley. Bones clattered, joined, reassembled. Sinews wrapped around them like vines awakening after a long winter. Flesh returned, and the valley was filled with bodies, but no breath. Prophesy to the breath, the voice said again. Call it from the four winds. So he did, and the breath came, rushing like a tempest through the still forms. They stirred. They stood. An army, vast and living, reborn not by might, but by the word. This, said the voice, is the house of Israel. Though they say, Our bones are dry, and our hope is lost, I will open their graves. I will bring them back to their land. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The weight of divine purpose pressed upon him like a mountain. He was no longer merely a prophet. He was a watchman stationed at the edge of eternity, bearing witness to a timeline that spiraled far beyond Babylon or Jerusalem. He was part of the clock now, its witness, its herald, its voice. The vision faded. The storm withdrew. The river returned. But nothing was as it had been. His eyes still burned with the fire of the scroll. His soul still echoed with the bones rising in the valley. And though his feet stood upon the earth once more, his spirit walked among wheels and wings, among thrones and voices that speak not just of judgment, but of restoration, of hope, of a future where time itself will be redeemed. And far above him, unseen by all but a prophet's eye, the celestial clock ticked on, marking the moments when heaven would again touch earth. Chapter 3. The Departure of Glory. Night fell heavy upon the exile camps, but Ezekiel did not sleep. His body rested beneath the open sky of Babylon, yet his spirit lingered in the heavens, tethered to visions too vast to forget. The fire of the scroll still glowed within his chest, its words burning with purpose, illuminating things no man had dared to imagine. Then once again the whirlwind came, not from earth, but from beyond it, a pull, a calling like a string tugged by eternity. Ezekiel was lifted from the realm of men, not by wings, but by the Spirit that knows no bounds. The world around him shimmered, shifted, and folded in on itself. He found himself in Jerusalem, but not the Jerusalem he remembered. This city pulsed with shadows and silence. Its stones groaned with the weight of betrayal. Its altars were cold. The golden menorah stood dim. Priests moved like specters, their mouths filled with prayers to gods who could not hear. The temple, once the dwelling place of the Almighty, was now no more than a shell, ornate and hollow. And above it, Ezekiel saw the unimaginable, the glory of the Lord, the same glory he had seen enthroned upon sapphire and encircled by rainbows, now hovered above the threshold of the temple, not resting, but waiting. Above the cherubim, above the crystal firmament, the glory trembled as though reluctant. The divine presence was preparing to depart. Ezekiel's heart broke. This was no ordinary vision. It was a farewell. And then the Spirit took him deeper, into the temple's inner court, through its walls, through stone and veil, to secret chambers. What he saw there would forever scar his soul. Men stood facing east, their backs to the sanctuary, worshiping the sun. In hidden recesses, elders bowed before idols, creeping creatures, foreign gods, carved abominations. Women wept for Thomas. Incense smoke rose not to heaven, but to the shadows. And above it all, the voice came again, now filled with sorrow and fire. Do you see, Son of Man? Is it too light a thing for the house of Judah to commit such detestable acts? Must they also fill the land with violence and provoke me still further? Ezekiel wanted to look away, but the Spirit would not allow it. He was shown a city devoured from within, justice abandoned, the poor trampled, the innocent slain. Every stone of Zion echoed with betrayal. Then came the call, "Bring forth the executioners of the city." 6 figures appeared, each holding a weapon of destruction. But among them was a 7th, robed in linen, with a writing case at his side. The Lord spoke to him first. "Go through the city, mark the foreheads of those who sigh and groan over all the abominations committed within it." And so he went, silently, swiftly, marking the faithful, the mourners, the remnant who still remembered the covenant. To the others, judgment followed. Ezekiel watched as the protectors of the city became its purifiers. Yet even as judgment fell, the man in linen returned. "I have done as you commanded," he said. And then the glory rose. The cherubim spread their wings. The wheels turned, burning with eyes. Slowly, mournfully, the glory of the Lord lifted above the temple, then paused above the eastern gate. Ezekiel wept, for he knew what it meant. God was leaving his sanctuary, not defeated, but abandoned, rejected by those who had once called him king. And yet, even in this departure, Ezekiel sensed something deeper, something hidden. The celestial clock had not stopped. This was not the end. It was a turning of the gears, a step in the great unfolding of redemption. A necessary exile before restoration, a silence before a song. The Spirit brought Ezekiel back, and the vision faded. The fire remained. The mark of the scroll still burned in his bones. Though judgment had been decreed, he had seen the thread that ran beneath it, a thread of mercy, of divine timing, of hope shaped in sorrow. And far above, in the vault of heaven, the celestial clock ticked ever onward, waiting for the moment the glory would return, not to a temple of stone, but to hearts made new. Chapter 4. The Valley of the Watchman. The dawn over Babylon was pale and hollow, as if the sun hesitated to rise. Among the reeds by the Chebar River, Ezekiel sat motionless, his eyes wide, but unseeing. The echoes of judgment still roared within his spirit. The cries of the fallen, the silence of the glory's departure, the rustle of wings vanishing into the heavens. But then, like the slow turning of a great key, a new vision unfolded. The Spirit lifted him again. No chariot of fire this time, no wheels of flame, only a deep wind that pulled him gently yet irresistibly from the dust. He rose beyond the earth, beyond memory, to a high mountain wrapped in storm. Lightning carved runes into the dark sky, and thunder whispered the names of cities yet unborn. There, atop the mountain, stood a lone tower of ancient stone, weathered, cracked, but unbroken. A watchtower. A voice called from its height, "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. When you hear my word, give them warning from me." Ezekiel turned, and beside him stood a figure cloaked in starlight, holding a horn made not of ram or bronze, but carved from a tree that had never grown on earth. The figure handed it to him. As Ezekiel took the horn, visions flooded his mind. A city asleep, unaware of the darkness gathering beyond its gates. Wolves among the sheep, walls crumbling, lights dimming, but no warning, no voice to wake them. Then a trumpet blast, a single trembling note, and the sleepers stirred. Some rose in alarm, others turned away. The voice spoke again. "If the watchman sees the sword coming and does not sound the trumpet, the people will perish, but their blood I will require at his hand. Yet if he warns them and they do not heed, they will die in their guilt, but he will be spared." The burden was clear. Ezekiel was no longer merely a prophet. He was a sentinel between two worlds, standing on the precipice of destruction, with the word of the Eternal as his trumpet. The vision shifted again. Now he stood by a great river, wide and endless, its waters gleaming like polished glass. Upon its surface floated a city, not built by hands, but by the will of heaven. Its towers shimmered with crystal light, and its streets echoed with songs not heard since Eden. But this was not Jerusalem. Not yet. This was a promise. Ezekiel stepped forward, and as he walked, the waters of the river whispered to him. They spoke of a time to come, of a people purified by exile, returned not just to their land but to their God. The stones of Zion would be rebuilt. The temple would rise again, not the one corrupted by idols, but one drawn from divine blueprints hidden in the folds of heaven. And at its heart, glory, not fading, not departing, dwelling. The Spirit turned him once more. He now saw the scattered bones of Israel, not dry and broken, but drawn together by threads of light. Across nations, across deserts, the remnant stirred. Their hearts beat in unison, each one marked by the memory of exile and the hope of return. You will say, the voice continued, "Our bones are dried up, our hope is lost. But I say, I will open your graves and bring you back. I will put my Spirit within you, and you shall live." The trumpet in Ezekiel's hand pulsed with light. Its call was no longer one of warning alone. It was a summons to awakening. And then the gears began to turn once more. Ezekiel heard them, not with his ears, but with the soul attuned to eternity. The celestial clock, hidden behind layers of vision and time, was in motion again. Each wheel, each face, each flame had a role. The exile was not the end. It was a reckoning, a resetting, a divine alignment for something far greater than mere restoration. It was preparation. Ezekiel was returned to the earth. The river Chebar murmured beside him. The reeds bent in the breeze. But within him now was a fire that could not be quenched. He rose. He would speak. He would sound the alarm. He would lift his voice until every stone of Zion trembled and every exile knew. The Lord watches, the Lord warns, the Lord restores. And above all things, unseen by the world but known to the prophet, the celestial clock ticked onward, toward a moment where mercy and justice would meet in fire and glory. Chapter 5. The Siege and the Scars. The city lay silent beneath a bruised sky, the sun hidden behind heavy clouds, as if mourning the fate soon to befall Jerusalem. Ezekiel's vision swept him through walls and streets, into the heart of a city girded for war, but shackled by sin. The air was thick with dread and anticipation, the weight of judgment pressing on every stone and soul. From the vantage point of his spirit, Ezekiel saw the gathering storm. Babylonian armies encircled the city like hungry wolves, their banners dark against the horizon. Siege engines creaked, arrows were sharpened, and whispers of betrayal filled the alleys. Yet within the city walls, corruption festered like a hidden wound. Leaders hoarded wealth while the poor starved. False prophets promised peace while the people prepared for destruction. Mothers wept for sons conscripted into hopeless defense. Then the vision darkened, and Ezekiel saw himself, not as a distant watcher, but as the very heart of the city's anguish. The Spirit bade him take a sharp sword, a symbol not of war, but of judgment, and use it to mark the city with scars, signs of what was to come. He was told to shave his head and beard, dividing the hair into 3 parts. 1/3 would be burned in the fire, symbolizing the famine and fire to consume the city. Another third would be struck with the sword, representing those who would fall by the sword or plague. The last third would be scattered to the wind, showing those taken into exile. Ezekiel obeyed without hesitation, each act of vivid prophecy carved into his flesh and spirit. His hair fell like snow, a sacrificial offering to the fate Jerusalem could not escape. But even as the vision played out in vivid detail, a deeper truth emerged. The scars on Ezekiel's body were the scars of the city's soul. Every wound he bore echoed the sins of the people, the broken covenants, the abandoned altars. The siege was not just a military campaign, it was a cosmic reckoning. As the walls of Jerusalem trembled, Ezekiel saw the wheels again, those celestial wheels alive with eyes, turning relentlessly above the city. They moved not with vengeance alone, but with purpose. Their gaze penetrated every hidden corner, every whispered prayer, every silent cry for mercy. And in the midst of judgment, the prophet heard a voice, steady and unyielding. Yet I will spare a remnant, a flicker of light in the darkness. From this remnant, a new covenant will be born, a people refined by fire, faithful to the Eternal's call. Ezekiel's heart burned with both sorrow and hope. The city's fall was imminent, but it was not the final chapter. For even in destruction, the hand of God was weaving threads of redemption. The vision faded. Ezekiel's scarred hands rested on his knees, the fire within him growing brighter. He was a messenger of warning, but also a herald of restoration. And beyond the mortal realm, the celestial clock continued to turn, its hands moving steadily toward a dawn where exile would end and the glory would return, not to a city of stone, but to hearts made whole. Chapter 6. The 4 Living Creatures. Ezekiel found himself drawn once more into the swirling heart of the vision, where the boundaries between heaven and earth blurred into a tapestry of light and shadow. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the hum of ancient power, a place where time bent and folded like the petals of a celestial flower. Before him stood 4 magnificent beings, each unlike any creature known to mortal eyes. Their forms shimmered with divine energy. Each bore 4 faces, a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. Wings stretched wide and stirred the air, feathers like burnished bronze and gleaming sapphire. These were the 4 living creatures, guardians of the throne, agents of the Eternal's will. Their eyes were countless, like stars multiplied beyond number, seeing all things, past, present, and future. They moved with a rhythm not bound by earthly logic, their wheels turning with a mysterious grace, full of eyes that reflected the cosmos itself. As Ezekiel watched, the creatures spoke, not with words, but with vibrations felt deep in the soul, stirring echoes of creation's song. The lion's roar was a thunderclap of judgment, the ox's low bellow a call to steadfastness, the man's voice a whisper of wisdom, the eagle's cry a soaring promise of hope. Ezekiel's heart pounded as he realized these beings were not mere visions, but living forces, the very pillars of the celestial clock, each face a symbol of God's dominion over earth and sky, strength and mercy, justice and grace. Then the creatures moved as one, their wings beating a rhythm that shook the heavens. From their midst, sparks of fire leapt and danced, illuminating the throne's radiance and the vast expanse around it. And at the center of this divine orchestra, Ezekiel saw a wheel within a wheel, an intricate mechanism, spinning endlessly, perfect in design and purpose. The wheels moved in harmony, their rims covered with eyes, symbolizing unending vigilance. The Spirit spoke through the vision. These living creatures carry the throne of the Lord. Where they go, the glory follows. They are the eyes and ears of eternity, the hands that set the course of history. Ezekiel's mind raced. The wheels were not just movement, they were meaning. Every rotation marked a moment in the divine plan, every gaze a judgment, every motion a promise. And as the creatures moved forward, Ezekiel felt himself drawn into the great clockwork of destiny, a single gear among many, chosen to witness and proclaim. The vision faded slowly, but the sound of wings and wheels lingered, an eternal call to faithfulness, to watchfulness, to hope. Ezekiel rose, knowing the path ahead would be fraught with hardship. Yet in the beating wings of those four living creatures, he found strength. The celestial clock was alive, and so was the promise of redemption. Chapter 7. The Crystal Throne and the Scroll of Destiny. Ezekiel's spirit soared beyond the veil of mortal sight, carried once more by the breath of the divine into realms untouched by time. The air here was thick with holiness, each particle shimmering as if made of countless tiny stars, and the sound of an eternal heartbeat pulsed beneath his very soul. Before him rose the crystal throne, radiant beyond description. It was not simply a seat, but a throne of infinite facets, each one reflecting the cosmos in perfect clarity. The light that radiated from it was both blinding and comforting, like the first dawn and the last twilight intertwined. The throne rested upon the living creatures, their wings unfurled like banners proclaiming the sovereignty of the eternal. Their many eyes glistened, absorbing and refracting the divine light, as if the entire universe watched from this single point. Upon the throne sat a figure cloaked in light, so pure it was impossible to look directly at him. His face was hidden in radiant mystery, but Ezekiel felt the immense power and boundless mercy radiating from his presence. It was the source and center of all that was, is, and ever would be. In the hand of this divine figure was a scroll, not made of ordinary parchment, but a living scroll, glowing with golden fire, its edges unfurling like celestial wings. The scroll was sealed with 7 seals, each one glowing with a different hue, humming with the weight of destiny. Ezekiel felt the gravity of what the scroll contained. It was the book of the ages, the unfolding plan of God for creation and humanity, the timeline of judgment, mercy, exile, and ultimate restoration. As he watched, the seals began to glow brighter, the light intensifying until it pierced the darkness around the throne. The sound of thunder echoed as the first seal broke open, a crack that sent ripples across the fabric of existence. Visions burst forth from the scroll, scenes of wars and plagues, of kingdoms rising and falling, of peoples wandering in exile and returning in hope. Yet beneath all these images, Ezekiel sensed a thread of divine wisdom, a pattern woven through chaos and suffering, guiding history toward a perfect climax. The voice of the Spirit whispered in his ear, "Behold, Son of Man, the great plan of the Almighty. Though shadows fall, his hand moves unseen. The celestial clock turns, marking the hours of judgment and grace. Every moment is known, every step ordained." Ezekiel felt both awe and fear. The weight of this knowledge was almost too much for a mortal soul. Yet the Spirit reassured him. "You are chosen to bear this vision, to be the watchman and the messenger. The scroll's secrets are not for despair, but for hope." Then the figure on the throne lifted a hand, and the seals began to open one by one. With each broken seal, a new force was unleashed into the cosmos, the rider on a white horse, the fiery war, famine's hunger, death's shadow, and beyond. But even as these forces marched across the heavens and earth, Ezekiel knew the final outcome was not defeat. It was redemption, for beyond the chaos of the seals, the scroll promised a new heaven and a new earth, where tears would be wiped away, and the celestial clock would rest in perfect harmony. The vision faded slowly, and Ezekiel was left alone once more by the river Chebar, the fire of the scroll burning bright within him. He knew his path was clear: to witness, to warn, to hope. The celestial clock was turning ever onward, an eternal dance of judgment and mercy, of exile and return, of darkness giving way to light. Chapter 8. The Abominations in the Temple. The vision took Ezekiel deep into the heart of Jerusalem, past the shattered walls and broken streets, into a place once holy but now steeped in shadow. The temple, God's dwelling on earth, stood silent and abandoned, yet its halls were far from empty. As Ezekiel's spirit moved through the vast chambers, a dreadful sight unfolded before his eyes. Idols and grotesque images filled the inner courts. Men and women bowed before them, their faces twisted with false devotion. The air was thick with the stench of corruption, and the sound of whispered conspiracies echoed through the stone corridors. The glory of the Lord, once radiant and overwhelming, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a veil of darkness hung heavy, as if the very spirit of the place had been defiled. Ezekiel's heart burned with sorrow and righteous anger. He saw the elders of Israel, the priests, and even women weaving pagan symbols into their hair. They worshipped the sun, the moon, and stars, heavenly bodies created by God, but now turned into objects of false worship. Then, the Spirit drew him closer to the inner sanctuary, where the abominations were greatest. There upon the walls were carved the figures of cherubim, once symbols of divine protection, but now twisted into grotesque parodies. Statues of beasts with multiple heads and eyes lined the corridors, their presence a mockery of the living creatures Ezekiel had seen in his earlier visions. The vision grew darker still. Ezekiel saw the priests engaging in secret rites, sacrificing animals and even children to these idols, seeking favor from powers opposed to the eternal. A voice thundered in the temple. "Son of man, will you judge them? Will you condemn the abominations they have committed? Yes, for they have defiled my sanctuary, turned away my glory, and led my people into exile." Ezekiel was overwhelmed by the weight of this judgment, yet he was also shown mercy. Though the abominations were great, the Spirit whispered of a time when the temple would be purified, the idols destroyed, and the glory of the Lord would return, not as a distant memory, but as a living fire within his people. The vision shifted to a great valley outside the city where the bones of the fallen lay scattered. The Lord's promise echoed, "I will open your graves and bring you into the land of Israel." Ezekiel's sorrow turned to hope as the valley came alive with the breath of the Spirit. Dry bones joined into skeletons, flesh formed, and life returned, symbolizing the resurrection of a broken people. From the darkened temple to the valley of bones, Ezekiel understood the cycle of judgment and restoration. The abominations were not the end. They were a call to repentance, a summons to return to the covenant. As the vision faded, Ezekiel knelt by the river Chebar, the fire of the Lord's presence burning bright in his chest. He was the watchman, the voice of warning, the bearer of hope. The celestial clock turned on, and the time for reckoning was near. Chapter 9. The Mark of Protection. The vision shifted again, pulling Ezekiel into a somber city gripped by impending doom. Jerusalem's streets were empty, its people trembling with fear of the judgment they knew was coming. Yet in the midst of despair, a divine decree echoed through the heavens. A mark of protection would be given to the faithful, the remnant who would survive the coming purge. Ezekiel saw a figure clothed in linen, a man with a writing kit at his side. He was charged with a solemn task, to mark the foreheads of those who grieved and lamented over the abominations that stained the city. This mark was no mere symbol. It was a divine seal, a sign that set the faithful apart from the judgment sweeping the land. The man moved swiftly through the streets, his eyes piercing the darkness, seeking those whose hearts were pure. Fathers mourning for their children, mothers praying in silence, elders weeping for the city's sins. All were touched by the invisible hand of mercy. Then Ezekiel's gaze was drawn to the executioners, 6 men armed with weapons of destruction, ready to carry out the Lord's judgment on the unmarked. Their faces were grim, yet their actions were commanded by the Eternal's justice. They moved methodically, sparing none who bore no mark, their steps echoing like thunder through the empty streets. The city groaned under the weight of divine wrath. Fires blazed, walls crumbled, and the cries of the fallen filled the air. Yet amidst the chaos, the marked remained untouched, shielded by a power beyond mortal comprehension. Ezekiel's spirit trembled as he witnessed this scene. The line between destruction and salvation was drawn by a mark, a simple yet profound symbol of allegiance and faith. The Spirit's voice came like a whisper, piercing the storm. The one who bears my mark will be preserved. The faithful remnant will rise from the ashes, a foundation for the new covenant. Ezekiel understood the gravity of this vision. Judgment was just and necessary, but so was mercy. The celestial clock did not only count down destruction, it also measured the moments of grace, the hours of hope. He saw the city's scars, deep and painful, but also the promise of healing. The mark was a reminder that even in darkest times, the hand of God was present, guiding and protecting. As the vision faded, Ezekiel's resolve hardened. He was called not only to warn, but to comfort, to be a beacon for those who remained faithful in a world turned upside down. The celestial clock ticked onward, each second a call to vigilance, faith, and hope. Chapter 10. The River of Life and the Restoration. The vision unfolded with majestic grandeur, carrying Ezekiel beyond the desolation of exile and judgment into a realm of hope and renewal. Before him stretched a river, clear and sparkling like liquid crystal, flowing steadily from beneath the threshold of the crystal throne itself. This river was no ordinary stream. It was the river of life, the very essence of divine grace and restoration. Ezekiel stepped forward, his feet sinking lightly into the riverbank's lush, verdant soil, alive with emerald grasses and blossoming flowers, bursting with colors that defied earthly description. The air shimmered with purity and peace. The weight of sorrow lifted like morning mist under the warm sun. As he followed the river's course, Ezekiel saw it healing everything it touched. Dead trees along the banks sprouted new leaves. The earth blossomed in radiant abundance. Fish swam in its waters, symbols of life, fertility, and hope. The sound of the river was a soothing song, a hymn of renewal that stirred the deepest places of his soul. But this river was more than a sign of restoration. It was a divine promise. A voice, both gentle and commanding, spoke to him. This river flows from the throne of the Eternal, and through it, life is given to all creation. It brings healing to the nations, washes away sin, and restores what was broken. Ezekiel's vision carried him to the river's source, a magnificent spring beneath the throne, where the waters pulsed with the energy of eternity itself. Here, the celestial clock's hands seemed to pause, reflecting a moment of perfect harmony between judgment and mercy. Around the river's banks, he beheld a vision of the restored city, Jerusalem reborn as a city of light. Its walls gleamed with precious stones, its gates wide open to all who sought refuge. The temple, purified and radiant, stood at the center, its glory reflecting the renewed covenant between God and his people. The people of the city moved in joy and unity, fathers teaching children, elders singing praises, and strangers embraced as family. No longer were they burdened by exile or sorrow, but by a profound peace rooted in divine presence. Ezekiel saw the tree of life planted beside the river, its leaves bearing healing for the nations. It stretched its branches toward the heavens, a living symbol of eternal life and God's unending care. Yet even in this vision of hope, Ezekiel knew the journey was not over. The river's flow was steady, but required the faith and commitment of the people. The celestial clock's turning was relentless, a reminder that vigilance, repentance, and faith were the path to this promised restoration. The Spirit's voice echoed once more. This river is the source of life for all who will drink. It is the fulfillment of the covenant, the end of exile, and the dawn of a new creation. Guard it, cherish it, and walk in its light. As the vision faded, Ezekiel felt the river's cool waters on his hands, the warmth of hope flooding his heart. He was a messenger of both warning and promise. The celestial clock was no longer only a measure of judgment. It was the heartbeat of restoration, pulsing with the promise of eternal life. Chapter 11. The glory departs and the promise of return. The vision carried Ezekiel once again into the sacred courts of the temple, where the atmosphere was thick with both divine presence and impending sorrow. The glory of the Lord, which once filled the sanctuary with radiant light and overwhelming power, now began to withdraw, retreating like a great storm dissipating on the horizon. Ezekiel watched as the luminous presence hovered above the cherubim, the living creatures whose wings stirred the air with the sound of rushing waters. Slowly, inexorably, the glory moved towards the temple's threshold, a heavy silence filling the chambers left behind. This departure was not a mere withdrawal, but a declaration, a sign that judgment was imminent because the people's hearts had turned away from the covenant. Ezekiel's spirit trembled as he witnessed priests and elders standing silent, their faces a mix of fear and resignation. The city of Jerusalem was soon to face exile and destruction, for the glory that sustained and protected them was no longer present. Yet, even as the glory withdrew, a voice from the throne spoke words of hope. Though I depart from this place because of their abominations, I will not abandon my covenant. A remnant will return, the exiled will be gathered. The vision shifted, and Ezekiel saw the scattered people of Israel. The faithful few who mourned their sins, carried their hope like a flame through the wilderness. They wandered desolate lands, but were never truly lost. The Spirit's voice whispered through the vision. From the ashes of judgment rises the promise of restoration. A new heart, a new spirit will be given. The exile will end, and the glory will return in fullness. Ezekiel beheld a future Jerusalem, rebuilt and renewed, where the glory of the Lord filled the city like a river of fire and light. The temple would stand again, not as a building of stone alone, but as a living sanctuary where God's presence dwelled among his people forever. This promise was the heart of the celestial clock, a divine rhythm that balanced judgment with mercy, exile with return, darkness with light. Ezekiel knew his mission was clear: to warn, to comfort, and to proclaim this hope to a broken world. The vision faded with a final whisper: "Prepare the way, Son of Man, for the day when the glory returns and the heavens and earth are made new." Ezekiel knelt by the river Chebar once more, the fire of the vision blazing within him. The celestial clock ticked on, steady, relentless, and full of promise. Chapter 12. The wheels within wheels and the divine chariot. The vision swirled once more, sweeping Ezekiel up into a cosmic storm where time and space bent like fragile glass. Above him, the sky unfolded into infinite dimensions, revealing the divine mechanics of the universe, the sacred machinery that moved creation with perfect precision. Before his eyes appeared the mysterious wheels within wheels, spinning and turning in perfect harmony, each wheel alive with countless eyes that pierced the veil of reality. These were no ordinary wheels. They were the Ophanim, celestial beings of immense power and mystery, carrying the very throne of the Almighty through the vastness of the heavens. Each wheel moved as if one, yet within each turn was a universe of motion, a dance of divine purpose. Ezekiel felt the vibrations of their movement, a rhythm echoing the heartbeat of eternity, syncing with the ticking of the celestial clock, an eternal chronometer counting the unfolding plan of God across time. The wheels moved in all directions without turning, their intricate spokes shimmering with radiant light. Their eyes, innumerable and unblinking, reflected the past, present, and future, revealing the depths of divine knowledge and the mysteries hidden to mortal minds. As Ezekiel gazed deeper, he saw the connection between the wheels and the living creatures, those four-faced beings who guarded the throne. The faces of a man, lion, ox, and eagle symbolized wisdom, courage, strength, and swiftness, qualities necessary to uphold the cosmic order. The Spirit's voice resonated within the whirlwind. "Behold, Son of Man, the chariot of the Lord, the vehicle of divine judgment and mercy. Its wheels do not falter, its path is unchanging. It moves with the certainty of the eternal purpose, bearing the weight of all creation." Ezekiel was drawn into the chariot itself, riding atop the living throne as it thundered through the celestial realms. He saw realms of light and shadow, worlds created and destroyed, all under the sovereign direction of the Almighty. The vision revealed the delicate balance of justice and mercy, the intertwining of freedom and fate. The wheels were not only instruments of divine will, but symbols of the intricate design that governs all life, the unseen hand that guides history and the cosmos alike. Ezekiel's heart swelled with awe and reverence, realizing the vastness of the task before him. To understand the celestial clock was to grasp the divine timetable, to see that every event, no matter how small or great, was part of an eternal symphony. Yet the chariot's journey was not only one of power, but also of intimacy. The God who moves the wheels is the same who watches over the smallest sparrow, the one who cares for every soul. As the vision began to fade, Ezekiel felt the sacred rhythm pulse within his own being. He was no longer just a witness, but a participant in the divine story. The celestial clock continued to turn, its wheels eternal and unbroken. Chapter 13. The Scroll of Lamentation and Hope. The vision shifted, and Ezekiel found himself before a great scroll, unfurled in the vast expanse of the heavens. Its surface was covered with writing, ancient words filled with sorrow, judgment, and a promise that echoed through eternity. This was the scroll of lamentation and hope, the divine record of a people's journey from exile toward restoration. As Ezekiel gazed upon the scroll, the words seemed to move and shimmer, revealing the weight of sin and the depth of repentance. The scroll bore the cries of a nation broken and scattered, mourning the loss of their homeland and the breach of their covenant with God. The Spirit's voice spoke softly but with unwavering authority. "Son of man, this scroll contains the history of Israel's fall and the promise of their return. Every tear, every sigh is recorded here, for nothing escapes the gaze of the eternal." Ezekiel felt the burden of the people's suffering as the scroll's words unfolded before him. Their pride and rebellion, their idols and betrayals, but also their moments of faith and cries for mercy. Then the vision deepened. The scroll began to glow with a radiant light, illuminating the darkness of despair. It revealed not only lamentation, but also hope, a covenant renewed, a future restored by God's mercy and justice. Ezekiel saw images within the scroll: the broken temple, the dry bones of the valley, the river of life flowing once more. Each symbol testified to the transformative power of repentance and the faithfulness of the Almighty. The Spirit urged Ezekiel, "You are called to be the scribe of this story, to bear witness to the judgment and to the promise. Your words will be a beacon for those who wander in darkness, a guide toward the light of restoration." Ezekiel took the scroll in his hands, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the fire of hope kindled within his soul. The celestial clock's hands moved steadily, marking the passage of divine time, the moment when judgment and mercy intersect. The vision closed with a glimpse of a city rebuilt, a people united, and a temple filled once again with the glory of God. Ezekiel knew that this scroll was not only a record, but a call to action, an invitation to embrace the path of repentance and renewal. The celestial clock ticked on, its rhythm eternal and unchanging. Chapter 14. The Valley of Dry Bones and the Breath of Life. Ezekiel was carried by the Spirit to a vast, desolate valley strewn with countless dry bones, bleached white by time and forgotten by the world. The landscape was barren and silent, the air heavy with the weight of death and despair. Yet, amidst this eerie silence, Ezekiel felt the stirring of something greater, a whisper of hope beneath the ruin. The Spirit commanded, "Son of man, can these bones live?" And though the answer seemed impossible, Ezekiel replied, "O Lord God, you alone know." Then, the divine voice filled the valley, calling out with power, "Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord." Ezekiel obeyed, his voice echoing across the hollow expanse. As he spoke, the bones began to tremble, rattling like distant thunder. They gathered together, bone to bone, sinew to sinew, flesh knitting over them with miraculous speed. Skin covered the once desolate frame, but still there was no breath within them. The Spirit then instructed, "Prophesy to the breath, prophesy, Son of man, and say to the breath, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live." Ezekiel's words pierced the silence, and suddenly a mighty wind swept through the valley, filling the bodies with life. The dry bones stood as a vast army, alive and breathing, a testament to God's power to restore even the most hopeless of situations. The vision unfolded further as Ezekiel understood the deeper meaning. These bones represented the whole house of Israel, cut off, scattered, and lifeless in exile. Yet the breath of God promised resurrection, not only physical but spiritual renewal, a restoration of heart and soul. The celestial clock measured this moment as the turning point, the hour when death was overcome by life, despair transformed by divine grace. Ezekiel's heart soared with renewed purpose. This vision was not only prophecy but assurance, a promise that no matter how broken, no matter how far lost, God's breath could bring new life. He saw the scattered tribes gathered, restored to their land, united under God's covenant once more. The wilderness blossomed, and the exiled returned with songs of joy. The Spirit's voice echoed one final time, "I will put my Spirit within you, and you shall live. I will place you in your own land, and you shall know that I am the Lord." As the vision faded, Ezekiel knelt in awe, understanding the vastness of God's mercy and the relentless turning of the celestial clock toward redemption. Chapter 15. The New Temple and the Eternal Presence. Ezekiel's vision shifted once more, lifting him above the ruins of the old city to behold a glorious new Jerusalem. The city radiated with a divine light, unlike anything seen on earth, a city not built by human hands, but crafted by the very presence of God. At its center stood the new temple, magnificent beyond description, its walls gleaming with precious stones and its gates flung wide in eternal welcome. The Spirit's voice spoke with reverence. "This is the dwelling place of the Lord, the sanctuary where heaven and earth unite. Here, my presence shall rest forever, and my people shall dwell in peace." Ezekiel walked through the temple courts, feeling the ground pulse with holy energy. The river of life flowed from beneath the threshold, winding through the city streets, bringing healing and renewal to all it touched. Trees bearing fruit for every season lined its banks, their leaves shining with the promise of healing for the nations. As Ezekiel moved deeper into the temple, he saw the throne of God surrounded by the four living creatures, the man, the lion, the ox, and the eagle, each reflecting the fullness of divine attributes. Above them, the celestial clock gleamed, its hands steady and sure, measuring the eternal rhythm of God's plan. The voice declared, "No longer will there be darkness or exile. The time of judgment has passed, and the age of restoration has dawned. My glory will illuminate this city, and my covenant will be written on the hearts of all. Ezekiel witnessed the gathered peoples, Jews and Gentiles alike, living in harmony, united in worship and service. No more division, no more sorrow, only the fullness of life in God's eternal kingdom. The vision revealed that this new creation was the fulfillment of the ancient promises, the final act of the celestial clock, where time and eternity converged, and God's presence was made manifest in the fullness of glory. Ezekiel bowed in awe, his mission fulfilled yet eternal, his spirit forever bound to the divine revelation. As the vision faded into radiant light, the voice whispered one final truth: "Behold, I make all things new." The celestial clock continued to turn, ever onward, ever faithful, marking the eternal story of redemption, hope, and divine love. Epilogue: The Eternal Watcher and the Journey Beyond. The vision of Ezekiel had come to an end, yet the story of the celestial clock was far from finished. As the last light of the new temple's glory faded into the endless horizon, Ezekiel stood once more at the threshold of time and eternity, a watcher between worlds, a prophet whose heart carried the weight of divine mysteries. He understood now that the visions were not mere images but living truths, eternal rhythms set by the hand of God, moving beyond human understanding, yet touching every soul willing to listen. The celestial clock was more than a divine mechanism. It was the heartbeat of creation, the sacred pulse that wove all existence into a tapestry of purpose and hope. Every moment, every breath was a tick in this eternal clockwork, a testament that nothing in the universe was random, but all was guided by a loving hand. Ezekiel saw beyond his time, the exile and the restoration, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the wars and the peace, all held within the turning of the divine wheels. The glory that once departed would return again and again, for God's covenant was everlasting. He felt the presence of the Almighty not as a distant force, but as an intimate companion walking beside him through the shadows and the light. The God who rides the fiery chariot, who moves the living wheels, was also the God who breathed life into dry bones and planted gardens in barren lands. Ezekiel's mission was to be a voice, a herald of hope amid despair, a reminder that even in the darkest exile, the celestial clock was turning toward new beginnings. As the winds of the Spirit carried him forward, Ezekiel realized that the greatest vision was not one of temples or wheels or scrolls, but of a restored relationship between God and his people, a relationship sealed not by stone, but by the breath of life. He became the eternal watcher, the faithful prophet whose eyes were open to the divine rhythms that govern all things. His visions lived on, a guiding light for generations yet to come. The celestial clock ticked on, its sound a symphony of justice, mercy, judgment, and grace. It echoed through the corridors of time, inviting all who listened to join in the divine dance. And so, the journey continues, through exile and return, through darkness and light, through every turning of the eternal clock, the story of God and humanity unfolds, forever bound by love, forever marked by hope.